a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and a geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing, now in a liquor store near you. I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic. Aaron, how's your week?
Pretty good. Been on the phone quite a bit, which you know I love. Not by choice either. We won't get into that. The Twins had an off day yesterday. We're recording this Friday.
Friday morning.
They're about to start a 3-game road series in Atlanta with the also struggling Braves.
Yeah.
Who are...
I am shocked that start.
Yeah, although...
As disappointing as the Twins start has been, I am more amazed at the Braves.
Well, yeah, the Braves' expectations were, one step higher, I would say, at least,
for sure,
than the Twins. Although I was looking at their stats just to see how who's off to a good start or not. And what you think of as the Braves, especially from a lineup standpoint, because you go back 2 years, they had an amazing lineup. They were setting all kinds of records. Well, Acuña's hurt. They got a bunch of 4 or 5 of their main guys are just out, and they just have a bunch of filler type of guys. So it's not the same lineup. The pitching, I would argue, is still really damn good.
I'm pretty sure. I remember us talking about a power ranking this way, but I also think it was about the over-unders. The top 4 teams in Major League Baseball were all in the National League, and one of those was the Braves.
Yes.
The expectations were definitely a level higher for the Braves than they were for the Twins.
Just go look at their last,
right?
5 years or something. I mean, they've won 90-something games.
They might have 8 or 10 game higher over-under than the Twins. 91.5 would be about right?
It's about 90 maybe, something like that. The Twins also just won.
And by the way, they're 5-13? Is that what something like that? Yeah, right.
The Twins just won 2 out of 3 from another
one of those top 4 teams,
contending team from the same division, the NL East, the Mets. Wasn't real pretty winning 2 out of 3.
No,
but I'll take it, and they'll take it to head out on the road, and then they play 3 in Atlanta, and then they're right back home for 6 or 7, 6. Hopefully,
6.
White Sox and Angels.
Yeah, because they've got Monday off, so Tuesday through Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday.
The Angels are actually playing decently. The White Sox we know are terrible. This is, a soft...
Somehow the Twins are not in last place in their division. And that's thank God for the White Sox, right? Yeah.
So this is a big stretch. I mean, you want to at least...
And the Twins are a total of 3.5 games out.
Yeah, although you're behind 3 teams. But yeah, it's a little early. We won't do magic number talk right now, I don't think. So that's what's ahead for the next week or so. But we're going to, recap largely the week that was, because there's a lot of news.
A lot of news.
And some coming later today.
I was going to say, what's ahead we don't even need to look a week and a half. We need to look about 6 hours ahead right now.
Yeah. So it's Friday morning as we record this. They're likely going to make multiple significant roster moves ahead of Friday night's game.
They already have.
In Atlanta. Yeah. They placed Matt Wallner on the IL, and then they traded for a guy named Jonah Bride, who had been DFA'd by the Marlins. Right. So we're going to talk about that, but also I think I got the little scoop on it last night. I beat Bobby by about 90 seconds, I think, which is a big victory for me because Bobby's good at what he does. Bobby Nightingale of the Star Tribune.
Nightingale.
Yeah.
Mocked me the other day for being the last person out of the press box.
Good. I like him even more than I did before.
And I'm like, when Bobby Nightingale mocks you for working too damn hard,
that's true. Well, we always make
for
fun
putting in too much time.
We always make fun of Bobby because him and Phil Miller, who we love both of them, they've both been multi-time guests. They'll be on again.
Yes.
2 not only great beat writers, but just great dudes. But they split the schedule basically 81 games each during the season. And yet,
except
when Phil is covering a homestand, Bobby will just show up.
Right.
And it's why are you here? I just wanted to work on a blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, he's a tryhard. And so for me, who is the opposite of a tryhard, I believe that's called a lazy bastard, something like that. I don't know the technical term for it. To beat him on anything is good. But so they're calling up Luke Keaschall, who has been playing at AAA 15 games or something like that. Top 100 consensus prospect across MLB. I had him as the Twins' number 3 prospect behind Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez. I think that's pretty common ranking for him within the Twins system. What's interesting about him is he's still not fully back from Tommy John surgery, which is elbow surgery, which he had in August. He played basically all of last season, first at high A and then double A, with a torn elbow ligament. But they put off the surgery because Tommy John surgery has, for a position player, 8 to 12 month recovery. Well, if he would have had the surgery like in April of last season, he would have missed the entire season anyway. So instead, what they did was they had him, instead of playing second base and center field like he usually does, because he couldn't throw, they had him play mostly first base and DH. And he hit like 310, pretty good power, stole 20-something bases. He actually won Twins Minor League Player of the Year. And there was some pretty good competition for that. And broke out, became a top 100 prospect, had an incredible offensive season, despite the fact that he was playing with a torn right elbow ligament that did in August. They finally shut him down and said, okay, let's get you started on the recovery here so you can be pretty much fully recovered by the start of the season. Well, in spring training, he didn't really play much defense, but he hit, and you were there. Rocco Baldelli was talking him up like crazy offensively.
So what you notice when you're looking at the lineups and such that come through spring training every day is, usually you see the guys who are kind of fringe players on the road, and you see the home players at home, right? Well, you would see a lineup of basically the opening day lineup, and then sitting at DH would be Keaschall.
Yeah, he's batting like 8th at DH.
Luke
Keaschall,
and you're like,
who's 22 years old, by the way.
I saw that 2 days in a row, and so I asked Rocco about it after the game, and I just said, is this a recognition of what he is doing here in spring training or something like that? And basically Rocco's response was, I haven't thought about it that way, but that's exactly what it is. He's like, I don't have any – you have to – earn that, and this isn't a reward. It's just he looks like he belongs there, kind of. That he belongs. And I think the final and so after a fairly eloquent paragraph answer, he kind of we're about ready to move on to the question. He's also like he can also just hit and run. Well,
that's what it is.
And run.
I mean,
he's like
he has a very right-handed hitter. He's not the biggest, most imposing guy or anything. Right. I mean, he looks like a second baseman, which is maybe where he'll end up, but. Very compact, direct, bat to ball base swing, but also has, I would say, underrated power potential because he can elevate and pull the ball to left field. And I think he popped like 15 homers in 100 and something games last year. But, he's not going to be a slugger, but the athleticism is there. The above average speed is there. He's a good base runner. If and when his elbow is fully recovered, he's a guy who can be solid at second base. Yeah. He has the wheels to potentially play center field. I kind of personally think he might end up as more of a corner guy, left field, right-handed bat, which would solve some of their issues. I'm not saying right now, but
but he can't do that now because he can't throw.
So, but what's interesting about them calling him up now is there's two things. I guess three things. One, he's not on the 40-man roster. Whereas like someone like Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's a left-handed hitting outfielder, who's their number 2 prospect, is on the 40-man roster and was also playing at AAA. It would have been much easier from a roster management standpoint to just call up Emmanuel Rodriguez for this. But the reason, my understanding is that the reason they're calling up Keaschall is not because they think he's better suited for it or anything. They just have more of an infield need than an outfield need because they're going to see if Willie Castro can play or not and might be going on the IL before this game.
Right.
Carlos Correa is banged up to the point that last time we saw him, he could field but not hit. And yes, they lost Wallner, but they feel like they have someone like, let's say, Kersey, who can be a left-handed hitter to maybe platoon.
Well, you've also got, basically for Kersey, you can just immediately plug in Bader, right? So you've got
Wallner.
Yeah, I'm sorry, for Wallner. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we can immediately plug in Bader. Right.
So they feel like they have a little more. You've got your
starting outfield, and then you've got Deshaun Kersey Jr. as a fourth outfielder that can play anyway, step in, etc.
Right. There's less of a need there. Whereas if you end up being, and they're going to run these guys through pregame Friday, which is in several hours, so I'm not going to make any pronouncements about who's going on the IL or anything, but they're short infielders, and also
Well, and then once you've got Larnach playing every day, and you've got Bader playing every day in the outfield. Those guys have been. Larnach has had half the bats at DH, so you've got a spot. You've got a DH spot essentially open right now, and at that point, Keaschall becomes a real option. Even with the elbow, right?
So that like you said, he hasn't resumed playing the outfield yet because they feel like the throws from the outfield are much more forceful and longer. He only recently, I think like 3 days ago, started playing full games at second base as opposed to playing like 5 innings and then being removed. He's also played a bunch of DH in the early going at St. Paul because they're just he's still on the throwing progression from Tommy John surgery. But he's hit okay. He hasn't hit for much power, but he's got a 380 on base percentage. He's stolen 4 bases. I mean, the things that Baldelli saw in spring training and the things that he showed last year in the minors were present for the most part, except for the power. And I also just think for the same reason that Keaschall's swing and just offensive approach caught Baldelli's eye and others' eye in spring training is why they probably hope that he is more likely to like step in and not have initial growing pains, which is that he's not a big strikeout guy. He's just sort of a bat to ball, control the strike zone, hit singles and doubles, do a little running. He's got some defensive flexibility in that he can play second, and he's also played a lot of first while going through the elbow injury last year. But yeah, it's unclear to me if he will be an option for them in the outfield just because he hasn't played it. Yeah. He is, by the way, he is a good outfielder. Yeah. Like he's a borderline legit center fielder who I think will be very good in time in left or right field. So yeah, it's ahead of schedule. It's similar to me to them calling up Brooks Lee off his rehab assignment. Right. 5 days ago or whatever it was. It's not that Lee wasn't eventually going to be called up. But he had only played 3 rehab games after missing 6 weeks or whatever with a back injury.
These guys are going to be forced into duty given the fact that they had about 4 injuries in 2 games or 3 games and I know over the homestand.
The perception with the Twins often is that they will turn to like minor league filler in these spots, and they did trade for Jonah Bride, who's a 29-year-old kind of journeyman utility guy, which we're going to talk about him in a second too.
I was wondering if we were going to see Orion Fitzgerald up there at one point.
There are other guys at AAA who are like good AAA players who have not come up through the organization, and I think fans who love to see prospects, and we're one of them, are often disappointed that some 29-year-old AAA guy who they signed to a minor league deal a few months ago got the call up instead of Brooks Lee, Luke Keaschall, Manuel Rodriguez, that sort of thing. Well, they're doing the opposite of that. I mean, they're going kind of against perception here, which is we've got legit prospects in Brooks Lee, who was a prospect, now has exhausted that, but essentially still a prospect. We have Keaschall, and these guys are coming back from injuries and haven't really played that much. But let's get him up here, and that's an upside play. Obviously,
it's an upside play, but it's also it's an upside play in part because of the positions that they have kind of falling open here. Like they've got a shortstop open. Well, what are you going to do? Like you either are kind of subjecting yourself to a lot of Ryan Fitzgerald, or you are putting Brooks Lee at shortstop and trying to get a third baseman in here. You've got a DH spot open. Well, then what you want is sort of the best pure hitter you think you've got in the minors right now, and you can take that as, hey, they're embracing a prospect who they think is going to, one of the better bats they've got down there. Or you can say, well, they don't really have any other decent bats.
But I think if they were not off to as bad a start, they would lean more towards the filler guys.
I agree with you.
But the truth is, you need boom or bust now, because just calling up some AAA veteran, and Jonah Bride is that, and he can be a contributor too. I'm actually somewhat intrigued by him. I'll say this. For a guy who was DFA'd by the Miami Marlins, he has more intrigue than most. That's a low bar, but that's what I'd say. But yeah, I think the start has caused them to say, we don't just need to tread water here. We need potentially...
Especially because someone who can lineup.
Who can come... Well, right. I mean, the sad part is with Wallner going on the IL especially, which we know he's already been placed on the IL. The other moves are to come maybe. He was their best hitter so far. And one of really 3 hitters along with Bader and Ty France who have really been consistently productive at all. Like, even an average OPS compared to the league. And now you've lost him for what will probably be at least the rest of the month.
You also lost Castro, who hasn't been one of the most productive. Well,
that's not official yet. Well, possibly a loser.
He was. I'm not sure he's off of the roster or anything around the IL. I'm just saying he was pulled from the game in a critical point where they really didn't have another option.
Although he hasn't looked that great either. He had some early
recently,
moments. So I mean, they're struggling for any sort of production. So I think that plays a part in why Keaschall gets the call up here. I mean, I'm excited to see Keaschall. I don't know that I would necessarily bet on him being ready to thrive immediately, and he is playing, with some physical limitations here that may give him less game-to-game utility. But to your point, they just need a bat.
Right.
And you said, who at AAA are you the most confident could come up here for 2 weeks and hit 280 and, not make a fool of themselves at the plate? Yeah, I mean, he might be who I would pick. And, Jose Miranda and Austin Martin had horrible timing here with their injuries.
Yeah.
And we should talk about Jose Miranda's injury because I'm
we should
absolutely fascinated by
We
this.
got a lot to cover here today.
But, Austin Martin, who was really the only position player, the only healthy position player on the 40-man roster other than the catchers who didn't make the team out of spring training, which, you
Right.
can read between the lines there and say he's, his stock has dropped. He got off to a great start at AAA. He was hitting like 415, a lot of singles, but I mean, nevertheless. And then he was, like a week ago, he was chasing after a ball in center field and clearly injured his hamstring and is now out with a hamstring injury. Well, if he were healthy, he definitely would have been called up.
Right.
I mean, for this, when 3 infielders go down, they would have turned to him. Jose Miranda gets demoted to the minors like a week ago, which that led to Brooks Lee being called up, which we just talked about. That's the swap they made in the infield, really at third base. And, that was performance-based on Miranda. Apparently, and a Twins official told all the beat writers this at the same time and started it with, let me get through this before you guys laugh. Apparently, Jose Miranda had been demoted to St. Paul, AAA, and I'm unclear which Target it was, if it was in St. Paul or wherever, but he went to Target to shop, I guess. I don't know, whatever. And he was buying like a case of water.
Yeah.
And it slipped out of his hand, which I can envision.
I get that
that
for sure.
the plastic
Yeah,
breaks.
that's right.
And he tried to like grab it before it fell to the ground, and he injured his hand.
Yeah. His finger caught something.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I said, after we were told that as a group, I said, was it Dasani? And the person who told us got really annoyed. Let me just say that. But Miranda, despite that they weren't happy with his performance, which was abysmal on all fronts, he certainly earned the demotion with his play.
Yes.
I think if he hadn't injured his hand shopping
sure.
for water, they'd have just brought him right back up.
I thought so too.
I mean, that happened to him 3 years ago.
I thought that after Tuesday night before Castro got hurt, that we
Right.
we would have seen him.
Yeah, you can, because when
he
it's,
was the obvious pick.
when it's injury based,
Right.
you can rescind a move or you can call a guy back up before
Right.
the 10 or 15 days are up.
That's right.
Instead, both those guys are out of the picture, which then leads to a trade for a Marlins guy, and it leads to Luke Keaschall being added to the 40-man roster, kind of rush to the majors. But that's the explanation for that. But yeah, Wallner, that's the one that really hurts, no pun intended. 850 OPS, had done well in the leadoff spot, had hit a homer off a lefty. Right. He was just putting together, good at bats. Hadn't really shown a ton of power yet, although he had banged some triples up against the gap and all that stuff. But he was one of the only productive guys from sort of throughout these 18, 19 games, whatever they've played. And now they're without him. They're really asking a lot from Keaschall, who's 22, and Brooks Lee, who just turned 24.
In the update that we got on Wallner, I wasn't on this text string.
Yeah.
Did they give any idea of whether or not they think it's going to be much longer than the 10-day?
It's not going to be the minimum.
Okay.
The part about them saying him and Correa, whatever the last game against the Mets, which was what? Wednesday.
Wednesday's day game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got hurt in Tuesday night's game, right?
So the talking point before that was, well, they could both be available off the bench. Well, Correa did appear in the game,
that's right,
but he couldn't hit.
He wasn't.
Wallner was never going to appear off the bench. That was them gamesmanship with the Mets.
I see.
Which they do a lot. It ain't football. Like, not telling the other team a guy's injured. You think they were staying up the night before worrying about Matt Wallner pinch hitting? Like, it's not that big of a deal. But the Twins really feel that that's a thing.
Okay.
By the way, when Buxton took his 2 days leave of absence for personal reasons,
that's right.
the first day they didn't announce it because they didn't want the Royals to know he wasn't with the team.
Right, yeah. Right.
Because the Royals were going to be shaking in their boots that he'd come off the bench and pinch run or something like that.
Also, they just didn't notice he wasn't on the bench anywhere.
Where's Byron Buxton? Oh, I don't know. What does he look like? Like, I mean, yeah, I don't. It's a real weird. They think they're Bill Belichick. All of a sudden, they're hiding stuff. Like, yeah, if Tom Brady has an ankle injury and he's not going to play, maybe don't tell the opponent that, but baseball isn't that. But anyway, that's what the Twins approach. So Wallner on the IL, Jonah Bride up to replace him, Castro possibly going on the IL in a matter of hours from the time we're recording this, which would probably be the move for Keaschall. If Castro doesn't go on the IL, they're also looking at Correa's wrist as a situation. They also could potentially send down just a reliever short term and kind of play shorthanded in the bullpen to add some extra infield depth while they wait for some of these injury situations to play out. It's possible someone like Gaspers gets sent down or DFA'd because at some point you add more position players.
It'll be interesting to see if they want to keep both Castro and Correa off of the IL because they think one or both will be back in 2 or 3 days.
Right.
What they do there now, that's already been almost 3 days. I would just
and it's
maybe
a 10
put
day
them both on the IL
for position players. So I would always lean towards just shutting a guy down. Let's talk about our first sponsor, which you heard John talk about right off the bat because they are our presenting sponsor.
Black Stag Brewing. I spend a lot of time talking about their IPAs because they are known for how good their IPAs are. But one of the things I've been trying to do recently is get into Pilsners and lagers. We're getting more towards the summer season. And they also make, right now, my favorite lager / Pilsner in the Twin Cities. It is Slopes French Pilsner. And I've actually started to see it on tap at a couple places around town. But you don't have to go find it. You don't have to go to their fantastic tap room, which you can go do. You can also just go to your local liquor store now because they are distributing all over Minnesota. They've got a brand new distributor. You can now find them everywhere. So you've got people over. Well, first of all, I would still, you've got friends who are going to want their IPA. So get the local 755 New England IPA. That is certainly their flagship. But get yourself a couple of Slopes French Pilsners or maybe their Pull Tab Pale Ale. That's another one of their favorites. They've also got a sour, the uncut jams. You're not going to go wrong with Black Stag Brewing. They're known for their beer. And now you can just find their beer in a liquor store near you, or you can ask about if it's there, or stop by their tap room because they've got even more than the ones that they have in cans available in their tap room, some of which are great. So stop by Black Stag Brewing near 94 and 280, or even easier, just ask for them at your local liquor store.
Okay, so on the Correa thing, I guess I would probably predict he will not go on the IL and that he will play, but who knows? I don't want to predict. I mean, depending on when we record some of these shows, we get put in a little bit of a weird spot because by the time people listen to this, the decision
you guys will probably know.
Right. So my tendency is to just not spend that much time talking about it because what's the point?
Right.
But what was interesting about Correa, so it was on Tuesday or Monday. I don't know. I was at the game, but he did an innocuous looking swing, fouled the ball off, and it was immediately clear like something wasn't right.
Well, he said afterwards that it was the first swing that it acted up, and then on the second swing,
he was shaking out his hand, or it turned out it was his wrist, obviously. And what he said afterward was, "I've actually been dealing with this since late last season."
Yeah, it was definitely bothering me in spring training, and then I've been dealing with it since late last season,
which is just amazing. Look, one of the things I've learned doing this job and being around the team and all that is, for all the injuries we know about. Sure. And there's a lot of them with the Twins. Right. I mean, we just talked about 8 of them, basically. I would say the Twins are known for injuries at this point. But there are also injuries that we don't know about. Or that, I remember Michael A. Taylor was here a couple years ago. And he played 130 games or whatever. He was, for them, an Iron Man. Well, there was a point during the season where his back was hurting him. And he actually went for an MRI. And I overheard him talking, I think, to Nick Gordon or something about it at the time. And he was telling him, it sucks. I wake up and blah, blah, blah. But he was playing through it. And there are so many of those. And then there's other ones like this Correa one where, how many minutes have we spent since spring training? By the way, he hit 110 during spring training.
Correct.
And is hitting, 150 now. But beyond that, the thing that I've talked about a lot and we've talked about a lot is his swing just looks odd. Yeah. It's not that he's swinging and missing, or it's not that his strikeout to walk ratio is terrible.
Yeah.
He's controlling the at-bats right up until the point where he has to hit the ball.
To the point where I was wondering if he had tried to retool his swing or something in the offseason.
Yes, and he was asked about that.
And was having trouble like implementing it here in the spring training and implementing it during the season? Did he need to make some changes to go back to something?
And
well, maybe he did.
There were people who were trying to break down his mechanics and saying like his feet are weird or his this is weird. And we just spent so much time talking about that because my point was if you look at like his expected numbers, they're okay. They're much better than his actual numbers, but they're not good. And he's just so rarely been able to pull a pitch with power to the pull side in the air.
Right.
And instead, it is almost seemed like he's just constant, like 3-2 kind of protect the plate mode, where he's just, I compared it to Mike Redmond's swing, which is not a compliment. I mean, he was a good backup hitting, or a good hitter for a backup catcher, but Mike Redmond's whole thing was, I'm just trying to slice the ball to right field as a right-handed hitter. And so many of Correa's swings have been like a guy on the defense just sort of trying to push the ball there, and what you end up with is just endless ground balls. And even when he pulls the ball, it ends up being a ground ball.
Lots of double plays.
There's no power to be had on ground balls, obviously, and there's 5 double plays to be hit into with that.
Right.
So for him to then
still with a pretty good exit velocity, which makes it a perfect ground ball double play.
Well, the last one he hit into was 6.43. You know, Byron Buxton wouldn't have beaten it out. It was hit so hard, but then to go, oh yeah, actually my wrist has been bothering me not only this season, not only during spring training, but dating back to the end of last season. And so the problem is, you know, guys play through stuff like this all the time, in addition to the injuries that actually cause guys to be shut down and go on the IL. And, you know, Baldelli's quotes about this and Correa's quotes about this certainly put up a front, whether it's realistic or not, that this is something he can and has played through, except he hasn't played well through it.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not just, look, if he had great expected numbers and he was, you know, flying out to the warning track in left center a lot or something like that, then I would say, all right, well, he's doing this despite the wrist, and it'll, you know, he's gotten unlucky a little bit. He's hitting the ball well. He's barreling the ball up. It'll turn around. But the reality is his actual production isn't there. His expected production isn't there. And even to a novice like me, who certainly is not an expert on hitting or hitting mechanics or swing mechanics, he just hasn't looked the same at any point this season. Well, when you add all that up, and then the guy goes, well, yeah, I've had a wrist injury for 7 months now or something like that. That's not great. And
especially because it means through the off season, it's come back. You know what I mean?
Or
Like, I don't know where it was in the off season.
Well, and they made it clear, like, he did go for an MRI after the fall ball Tuesday, I guess it was. And there's no like structural damage, or if there is.
But he actually said even before that MRI that they've had MRIs on that list.
So I'm not trying to say he's hiding an injury, or you know, he's got a torn ligament that they've decided he's going to play through. I'm not. It's not a criticism necessarily, but it explains a lot about what we've seen from him during spring training and also now.
It certainly fits the narrative. Yeah, right.
And I don't know. It's hard to be optimistic that if it hasn't solved itself in 6 months, that it's going to solve itself while you're playing. I also just wonder, you know, if he was in position where he, I don't want to say couldn't. I mean, he could have batted Wednesday after he came in defensively, but their plan was to avoid that at all costs, to the point that
yeah, I mean, we got word that there was a pitcher. I'm not ready to break it the source, but yeah, we had a pitcher preparing to bat for Correa.
A pitcher with a history of being a hitter prior to becoming a pitcher. And if you're going out of your way at that point not to let him bat, he going to make it 130 something more games with this wrist and actually start producing? And I mean, they got all kinds of problems, but that's now near the top of the list for me, because he just has not looked right. And if Carlos Correa isn't going to be good, I mean, we saw it last year when he went down, had a great first half, like a truly great first half, and then missed 2 months. The team just isn't the same with him, or without him. And so that's something to definitely watch, whether or not he plays tonight, or what the situation ends up being. Let me see. I had a couple other. I'm going
to ask you about one. Have you heard anything about Vasquez?
I think he's fine.
What we heard was they were worried about his hand. Then his hand, everything turned out okay. The scan turned out okay. We don't know what that scan was exactly.
As of the last home game, he was optimistic that it had already shown improvement. Here's the thing about...
Well, here's the thing. I know he would have been the guy to pinch hit.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
And if he wasn't available, if they were warming up a pitcher to pinch hit, that means that Vasquez was not available on Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that could be a roster move, too. The thing about their 40-man roster is they have 2 other catchers on the 40-man roster. Jared Camargo and Diego Cartaya. Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, Jeffers is banged up too. He hurt his thumb like a week and a half ago or whatever it was. It was all bloody and everything. The thing with Vasquez, I mean, catchers are tough. I mean, I can't believe the injuries catcher. I talked to a couple years ago, Sandy Leone, who's like a veteran third catcher, played 10 years in the majors. Right. Every time we would see him, he'd have like his knees in an ice bath and like like the things catchers have to do. And you look at Jeffers, who's as strong as a player is ever going to be, and he's just constantly getting beat up by foul tips, and his hands bloody and everything. And so Baldelli's point was when Vasquez left that game, what was that? Was that Monday's game?
Yeah, I think it was Monday's game.
Whatever, on this last homestand. That sent alarm bells because they went out to check on him. And most of the time when you go out to check on any catcher, and certainly Christian Vasquez, who has earned a reputation for being durable and tough and, you know, throughout, 14 years in the majors or whatever the hell it is. And Baldelli was like, I went out there and I said, how you doing? And he said, it hurts a lot. And Baldelli said, oh man, like I wonder like if his arm fell off at that point.
Exactly right.
But by the next day, so I guess they seemed relatively optimistic, but I don't know. This is another situation where because they left Target Field Wednesday and then had a day off Thursday, we're a little bit out of the loop here because there's no updates given on that sort of thing. So I think we're going to learn a lot about a lot of players, especially on the position player side, pre-game tonight in Atlanta, which I think it's a 6:30 game or something like that. So we should have.
That means by the end of that game on Wednesday, they literally had 4 guys hurt that could not bat.
Which is why, I mean, it eventually led to the Keaschall
all on their 13 position players.
But it's also why they made, during the off day, a trade with the Marlins for a guy named Jonah Bride, who I guess we can give a quick scouting report on him. 29-year-old, has played a lot in the minors, played 71 games for the Marlins last year and hit like 275 with some pretty good power.
Yeah, he's one of those, he seems like a kind of a 4A guy that got his shot and actually did something.
I mean, he had like 300 at-bats and he had
started the year at AAA, I think. And I think and then kind of got a little bit of part-time, but basically once they traded away, who did they trade away? They traded away somebody, and then he finally got a lot of time.
And he had like a 120 OPS plus. Yes. The comp I've seen for him is like Kyle Farmer.
Okay.
That type of guy. And I mean, obviously, if they could find a Kyle Farmer 2.0 who made the minimum salary and was 29, that'd be a useful player. Right. It's also possible that this guy's up for 5 days until they get a little healthier and he gets DFA'd. Right. I mean, they acquired him from the Marlins who had DFA'd him because he was like 10 for 40 or something.
He's going to be 4 for 40. He's going to be the starting third baseman right now, right? Who else are they playing at third base?
I mean, Lee.
Yeah, but who's playing shortstop?
Correa.
Oh, well, you're thinking Correa is going to. I don't think.
We'll see. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of this is in flux.
I'm going to assume that neither Correa or Castro are available to hit tonight. We'll see. So, I could be wrong.
I mean, they could play Correa at short and just have him bunt. Would that be that much different than how he's hit so far? No offense, but literally no offense. No offense either. Well, now I didn't mean that. I just kind of stumbled into that one, believe me. But he's a guy in Bride who had a really productive 70 games with the Marlins last year, but then was like 4 for 40 this year. They DFA him. The Twins, I don't think would have made this trade for him if they weren't so banged up. But I think they looked at, like you just described, we just need a warm body. I mean, this guy's on the waiver wire.
Looking at St. Paul after Tuesdays, I basically wrote, it comes down to, and this was when Castro was still healthy, just so we're clear, that what this means is Castro's your new everyday third, or Castro and Lee. Castro and Lee are your everyday third base shortstop. I'm not sure which way they would actually play them, right? But you now need a backup infielder for one of those spots.
They just need some flexibility and a warm body. And
that's whether you're going to St. Paul to get an Alvarez or a Fitzgerald.
Whereas with Bride, I mean, 2 things here. And I know people are like, well, why wouldn't they just call up one of their own guys? Well, I don't really see why it's bad to go get a guy when the guys we're talking about at AAA were just signed to minor league deals 2 months ago anyway. So what's the difference? The difference with Bride is, he had a 120 he had an 800 OPS in 70 games as a major leaguer last year. Yeah. He's right-handed. Yeah. He can play second, third, and first. He actually can catch in an emergency, similar to Gasper. And you could probably stick his ass in the outfield if you wanted to a little bit too. I mean, he's bounced around everywhere defensively. And the other thing with Bride is, in terms of why him and not just fill in the blank 28-year-old AAA veteran that they already had in St. Paul, he's been an amazing AAA hitter.
Right.
He would be the Saints' best hitter. I mean, and so if Jonah Bride were with the Saints for the past 3 weeks, people would be saying, why don't they call up Jonah Bride? He's got, he's a 300 hitter, 400 on base percentage, 500 slugging percentage. He plays everywhere. Strikeout to walk ratio is good. He lacks power, and I'm not sitting here telling you he's going to become some superstar. I actually think there's a chance he lasts less than a week with the Twins.
Right.
Like once the injuries get settled a little bit, I could see them, DFAing him, because they acquired him for cash consideration. So all that means is he got DFA'd by the Marlins, who are one of the worst teams in baseball. He was going to be placed on the waiver wire, but the Twins thought, let's just jump the waiver wire and give them, $1,000. I mean, who knows? It could be $500, $10,000, for the Twins, minimal amount. It's not like they're invested in him, but he is sort of an intriguing player. I mean,
yeah, he didn't have a great start to this year.
Yeah, he was 4 for 40.
Yeah, yeah. He was Mickey Gasper with more defensive flexibility.
Well, a lot more defensive flexibility.
Right, yeah, exactly. Right.
So yeah, we'll see. They just needed a warm body. Martin's hurt, Miranda's hurt, Castro's hurt, Wallner's hurt. Royce Lewis is already on the IL.
Right.
Correa might be out. Who knows? Who am I missing? Is there another guy I'm missing? Well, Vasquez is banged up.
Yeah.
I mean, they're banged up, but this is how it always is with the Minnesota Twins. Once everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and they seem to get punched in the face quite a bit. I don't know. Do you think we talked enough about Keaschall? I'm excited about Keaschall.
I am too.
I'm not necessarily excited about him.
I think for the last week and a half we've been saying, I can see a way that Keaschall ends up on this roster in a weird way because of struggling offense. Now, once you get enough injuries, everybody's in play.
I did my predictions coming into the season for the Athletic. That was my season preview, and one of them was that he'd be part of the lineup, everyday lineup in the second half. We'll see. That might not be true or untrue here. I could see this being relatively short term.
Well, I don't want to. It's not like he's been on a tear at AAA or something like that as well, or even was he necessarily on a tear at spring training. Like what he showed is that he probably has. He looks like somebody who has a Major League Baseball career. Now, whether or not that he comes up and is able to immediately make an impact on this offense, that has happened. It's also happened that they fall pretty flat their first time, or that they're really good for the first week, and then an adjustment is made, and then they have to make another adjustment.
Really good for the first week might be all they need.
Well, that might be. He might be right.
That might just become really good.
That's right.
And then you send them down, and then you let them.
Yeah, I'm excited to. I was excited to see him in spring training, and I'm excited to see him now in the majors.
He was a 2023 second-round pick out of Arizona State, had a monster year at Arizona State to kind of raise his profile a lot. Power that was more than people expected because he's not the biggest, strongest-looking guy. Had a good debut, and then last year started at high A, went to double A, kind of split time between the two, hit 300. Good strikeout to walk ratio, 15 homers in 100 games, a lot of doubles, a lot of triples, 20-something steals. Defensively, like I said, limited to first base and DH mostly because of the elbow injury. But, we're going to have to see how the arm recovers. He didn't have an amazing arm to begin with. He had an okay arm, so it's possible that it's a weak arm now.
Sure, right.
But we don't know that because he's still kind of rehabbing or recovering from elbow. But in terms of just speed, athleticism, range, and all that, he can definitely play second base. We're not talking about a Mickey Gasper or even Julian situation at second base. He's a pretty good infielder.
Right.
He can probably play center field, although my feeling on that is, first of all, right now he hasn't played the outfield, but I'm talking more long term.
Right.
He's unlikely to ever be one of their best center field options. First of all, you have Correa, but Emmanuel Rodriguez is probably a better center fielder. Oh, yeah. Buxton. No. They're going to move Correa out to center.
Are you breaking news?
No, I am not. Buxton, they have Bader now. Rodriguez is probably a better bet to be in center field. Walker Jenkins, Deshaun Kersey, etc. But he's a decent center fielder, and that means he can certainly be a corner guy. So I think right-handed bat, if it goes well, he's sort of an ideal leadoff or number 2 type of hitter. If he doesn't quite develop that type of a power that they're hoping, he's more of a 7, 8, 9 hitter. But I definitely think a long-term core piece for them.
He definitely flashed at spring training, in the same way that Zebby Matthews was sort of the talk of spring training from the pitching side. Keaschall was, kind of the talk of the, here's a new guy that we think we can really project something on in the same way that Brooks Lee was last year, or that Edward Julian was the year before, something like that. And so, this is This is not like, you can't hold, he's done too much at AAA. There's no reason to hold him back. This spot is his to take, but it's an opportunity. But
we talk about this a lot with prospects, which is everyone loves to go, when's this guy's ETA?
Right.
When will he be called up? April of this year, July of this year. What's the 2027 lineup look like? The reality is that the majority of prospects get called up not because of what they did, but because of the circumstances on the team. We just saw that with Brooks Lee.
Yeah.
He was called up not because his 3 games that he had played at AAA were so spectacular, but it's because they were sending down Miranda and they felt like they needed versatility and hopefully a push offensively from Lee. Keaschall, as you said, it wasn't like Keaschall was hitting 500 in 15 games at AAA. Right. He's still coming back from surgery. He's limited defensively. He had been okay, but not great. But they just need bodies.
Yes.
And so for all this, when's the ETA on Luke Keaschall? When's the ETA on Walker Jenkins? The reality is you get yourself to AAA and then you let stuff happen in front of you to clear a path for you. And that's been true throughout baseball history.
Yes.
If you look back at the majority of, for instance, Justin Morneau, who's one of the best prospects they've ever had and just murdered AAA pitching, was not initially called up because of what he was doing. He was initially called up because Doug Minkiewicz got hurt. Right. And they had to call him up. Right. And that's true of pretty much everyone except for like Joe Mauer types, where like they actually cleared room for Joe Mauer the previous offseason. That does happen once in a while. But it's going to be true of Emmanuel Rodriguez too. Yeah. Emmanuel Rodriguez, maybe he just goes and crushes for a couple months and forces the issue. But more likely is he'll be called up when there's an opening in the outfield and he's also playing well. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing with Keaschall now. Who knows if this will be a long-term thing or a week-long thing or whatever, but it's always fun to get a glimpse of a guy that you realistically think will be a 5+ year regular.
Yeah, I agree.
Before we talk...
In the same way that Luke Keaschall, we'll see a little bit of him now and we'll see what he's like in about 6 months. You can do the same thing with what do you want your hair to look like in 3 to 6 months from now? And maybe you take a first step. Go to hims.com and check out their online. You can take a free online visit today at hims.com. And you just kind of explore a little bit. You find out your options. And by the end of this Twins baseball season, maybe your hair is looking a little bit better than it is right now.
Yes, you can start your free online visit today at hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/Gleeman. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. And then our last sponsor is Game Time as the Twins come back home here for a 2-series homestand against the White Sox and the Angels. And you want to grab some tickets and you also want to get the best value for your tickets. That's something that the Game Time app can do. It'll basically show you for that price, but also for the location of the seat and the sections of the seat, what's the best value here? Because just because something's cheap, you might be in the nosebleeds. Just because something's expensive, you might be behind a pole or something that you don't want to be happy sitting there. You can go on the Game Time app and they'll actually show you where the seat is, how much, if it's a good value relative to other seats or not. So I think that's really good. And then the other thing, because it's just it's an app as opposed to a website or anything. And John, I've seen John do this.
Oh, yeah.
If you're pre-gaming somewhere downtown and you just go, okay, it's time to walk to the game, on your walk towards Target Field, open up the Game Time app, grab some tickets, and then you just scan and you walk right in. It couldn't be easier. And you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app, download it, create an account, and then use the code Gleeman, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Right. But again, just create an account on the Game Time app and then redeem the code GLEEMAN for $20 off your first purchase.
You can be one of those 10,240 people at a Twins game.
Oh, you're trying to get me in trouble, John. Well, it was Monday's game.
What should the final segment be about?
No, we're going to be quick on this because you know why? I don't have time to do another 2-hour phone call with an angry Twins employee today. I just don't have the time in my schedule, my busy schedule. Monday night against the Mets was the lowest announced attendance, which I think people know this, and the Twins aren't alone. Every team does this.
Right, yes.
They announce an attendance, and I know whenever they do, they announced, 10,200 and something
Right.
for Monday.
Right.
That's the lowest announced attendance in the 16-year history of Target Field. And let me tell you, there were not 10,000.
Well, of course not. Right. There never are. Right.
That's always the reaction.
right.
There were maybe 6,000 people there, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm being charitable.
You were being very charitable.
Yeah, I don't need another phone call, John.
Yeah, whatever. I'll say that.
But all teams, they say announced attendance instead of attendance because they are revealing not how many butts are actually in seats,
Right.
how many tickets were sold,
Right.
or represented in various ticket packages that have been sold. And so when you announced 10,240 or whatever it was, not only was that the worst in the history of Target Field, which started in 2010, that's ignoring the 2020 and 2021 COVID restricted attendance years, just to be clear. I looked up, this is the worst home attendance for any Minnesota Twins game since April 30th,
That amazes me.
2002. Now, I wrote about this. Let me tell you two facts to show you how long ago April 30th, 2002 was. Okay. Number one, they played that day the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, which are not even called that anymore.
Right,
They're now
yes.
the Rays. The starter was Kyle Loesch. The closer was Eddie Guardado. AJ Pierzynski was the starting catcher.
Okay.
But let me tell you two factoids that will hopefully place into context how long ago that was. Number one, a year after that,
They were slated for contraction, by the way.
Okay.
So we go.
they had about 10,000 people there, so
Right.
that's not a bad argument.
Yep.
The next season, the Rays called up a 20-year-old center fielder named Rocco Baldelli.
Right. Yes, that's right.
And about 5 months after this game was played on April 30th, 2002, a 19-year-old college student named Aaron Gleeman created a blog and started blogging about the Twins. And about how many months? A couple months after that?
It was a couple months before that. That's when I started. I started in February.
What, 63-year-old you were at that time?
That's right. I was about 80.
And what the hell were you? You were a systems something?
Systems analyst, yeah.
A 75-year-old systems
IT
analyst.
consultant, yeah.
Launched twinsgeek.com.
That's
Was it
right.
even that at that point?
I think it was twinsgeek.com at that point, yeah.
And as I said, I've looked in the mirror lately, so I know how long ago that was.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a long time. And to set that record, and I know everyone always goes, well, the weather. But the weather's always bad. And
Right.
so I wrote about it yesterday. We don't have to go through all this stuff, but Twins were not thrilled with what I wrote about it. But I'll stand by what I wrote. They're in trouble from an attendance standpoint. And I think this is, hell, I was talking about this based on the opening series against Houston. I said, I think the second and third game dropping to like 14,000 or whatever it was kind of canary in the coal mine for what's ahead. Sure. And we've certainly seen that play out. And yes, weather in April is a factor, but it's no different this April than past April.
This has been a warmer April than most Aprils.
Yes. I mean, they've had snowouts in April
right.
before.
Yeah, of course.
And if you look year over year, first 9 games, home games of this season versus first 9 home games, let's say, of last season, which was also played in April, similar weather. Here's how far I took this. I looked up the weather for those games to see precipitation and average temperature, and you are correct. These are slightly warmer this year than past years. They're down like 9 to 10%, which is like 1,600 fans a game or something like that.
I will suggest that it goes back to 2002, the same thing. What I thought when I read that was, and in both cases, it's sort of self-inflicted.
Yes.
You know, in 2002, the reason the attendance was so low is because they were trying to actively contract the team, and fans had enough of it.
Yeah,
they'd had enough of it, and that was, by the way, with a good start. Like that team had a great start in 2002.
Had been their first winning team.
Right. Yes.
Now they fell apart in the second half.
They fell apart in the second half.
It was still a very young, exciting winning team for the first time in a long time.
Right.
And then, 2002, that's their first division title that they ended up winning.
Right.
Now, they didn't know that on April 30th necessarily.
No, but they had a hot start to that year. They ended up carrying a big lead into that.
And that team had a lot of, Pierzynskis and Torrey Hunters and a lot of building block type of guys on it.
That's right. Now, building block guys who kind of came together that year, like that's what happened that year. That was a hot start year, but the problem is that nobody really wanted to root for a team that you wanted to invest in a team that, frankly, might get snatched away from them by an owner that was just going to take a check.
Right.
Basically, just get a check from Major League Baseball for $250 million or something like that to get rid of a to get rid of a team,
to sell what they perceive as a business and what the rest of the Twin Cities and Upper Midwest perceives as a community asset.
That's right.
And we're in the same spot now.
And now we have.
They're trying to literally sell the team now.
Right, that's right.
They've done many things in terms of decision making that have ruined fan morale, and also the on-field product has done plenty to ruin fan morale. Although that's all interconnected, and it's the same family owning it. And these are the type of things that cause Twins employees to call me and scream at me, but that's okay. I'm lucky we live in an era now where there's not like minutes on your cell phone. Like, remember like 20 years ago, it was like,
or a party line.
I would have.
That would have been interesting.
I could have charged you $1,000 a minute to listen to this conversation, John.
You probably could have.
Could have been a hell of a
I could have
Patreon.
come up with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the Twins are at, and I will stand by that. And I don't think the Twins quite realize the kind of what slice of the fan morale pie is based on ownership as opposed to just a poor record to start the season.
Sure.
Now, you combine both of those, and what you get is 10,000 people showing up to a game, by the way, against a pretty high-profile opponent.
That's true.
Whose own home attendance is up more than any team in baseball, the New York Mets.
Yeah.
After signing Juan Soto. And
Which was, the attendance was definitely boosted by Mets tours here.
Oh, there were so many Mets fans. And
Oh, my God.
They were loud, too.
And they were all, I mean, I'm not talking about the stadium. I'm talking about outside the stadium, walking around downtown. There were a lot of Mets fans here this weekend, or this week.
Yeah, so we'll see, because this next homestand, it's going to be slightly better weather, I assume, but it's going to be White Sox and Angels, and I don't know that either of those are going to be big draws. So we'll see. I wrote about this yesterday quite a bit. Well-read article in the Twins' mind, a little too well-read, I think. We'll talk about this more than we have talked about, but to be honest, I'm sort of fatigued on this because it's we're at the point now, and I guess we should be flattered in a strange way, but any time we criticize the Twins, if we criticize the manager, we hear from someone about it. If we criticize the players, we hear from someone about it. If we criticize the front office, we certainly hear from someone about it. If we talk about the sales stuff from a business standpoint and get some little detail wrong, we hear about it. If I am sitting there looking out at the lowest crowd they've had in 25 years, and I say, I'm going to write about that, I got to talk on the phone for 2 hours with someone about it. And so it is, it's frustrating. It's, I'm sick of it. But I'm not going to let that change us giving our real unvarnished opinion about things. Because what I'm not going to do...
There's no way to spin the lowest attendance since 2002.
Well, you'd think that, wouldn't you?
I mean...
You were listening in on that call, weren't you, John? What I'm not going to do...
What don't you get?
is play the Emperor's New Clothes.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you something doesn't exist, and I'm not going to BS someone and say that attendance isn't a problem and that it's not coming from the fans' feelings towards ownership and all that stuff. As I said several times to several different Twins employees over recent times, I don't work for you. I work for Twins fans. And to me, I would not be doing my job, and we wouldn't be doing our job if we just saw the lowest attended game in 20-something years and we didn't talk about it, and we didn't talk about it in a way that is realistic, which is to say it's not just about the team performing poorly. That's a huge factor, but also that's not an independent factor either. That can be linked back to the front office, which can be linked to ownership and all that stuff. So go read the article I wrote, and you can feel...
By the way, it was great.
Well,
thanks,
John.
I really liked that story.
Look at you. You actually read it.
I thought your rhetorical style was
it
was peak, and I think that's why you got a call about it more so than
I was a little too clever. Too clever by half is what I was told.
I don't know. I thought it was good. I was happy with that.
But that's the thing. If you
I read that and I said, I don't say that. I did that. Where I turned to Chris and said, "Aaron wrote a really good story this day. Really good story." I said out loud.
And Chrissy said, "Aaron's a writer."
Aaron,
or Aaron who?
Is that the guy that you keep having over?
Yeah, the guy who's always in my kitchen in his sweatpants, apologizing for ruining my morning. Yeah, that's.
Where is he?
We should also note speaking of people listening to the Patreon, we had Matthew Leach, who is the new MLB.com Twins reporter, who replaced our old friend Do-Hyung Park.
Right. Who we hope, by the way, we got lots of comments on this. We do hope to have Doe on again.
Yes.
Soon. Yeah.
He's alive.
Right. Yes.
Still watching the Twins. Right. I've talked to him. But Matthew was a great guest, and we kind of view it's like a welcome party for a new writer.
Right,
I mean, Bobby, same thing.
Hazing is what you're saying.
Well, I don't want to say haze when we talk about writing. But we had a great time talking with Matthew. He has such an interesting professional story in terms of how he got to covering the Cardinals under Tony La Russa and the Albert Pujols era for 10 years with no beat writing experience. Well, then how he took a decade off and is now back on the beat.
And it came into this from a little bit different path, but also a very similar path to us at about the same timeline too. Like, it was very interesting. Yeah. If you're interested in sort of the beginnings of baseball writing on the internet, I think you will really if you're interested in how did blogs start and how did ESPN.com become a thing and all this other stuff.
He has a very
there's a lot. How did sabermetrics move from geeky self-published books to mainstream? He's like Forrest Gump in Forrest Gump, where the joke is that he's just at every historical event. That's how Matthew is, but for online baseball writing. So that's on the Patreon. And we also talked about Twin stuff because I was very curious to just get his initial impressions of the team and the coaching staff and how things work here versus St. Louis and all that. Yeah. And he had some interesting stuff on there. Let's talk a little bit. We've talked a lot about hitting and injuries to position players. Let's just finish up here talking about some pitching stuff. So David Festa has looked pretty good. Pretty good
in 2 starts.
Yep.
There was a lot of talk about him maybe making 1 start and then Zebby Matthews coming up instead. It sounded like Zebby Matthews had some sort of minor physical issue, so Festa ended up making 2 starts. Looked pretty good in both of them. Probably is going to make a 3rd start here, although Pablo Lopez on Saturday will be making a rehab start for the Saints.
Oh, wow.
And my guess is if that goes well, that's the only rehab start.
Yeah, of course.
So he could be very...
So that would put him on track for Thursday's game?
Something like that, yeah. He's close to rejoining the rotation.
And we should mention Zebby Matthews has pitched for the Saints.
So the good news on Zebby Matthews is whatever it was that kept him from being called up like Monday or Tuesday to start against the Mets did not keep him from starting Tuesday for the Saints. Right. And he threw 5 innings of 1-run ball, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, almost hit 100 miles an hour with the fastball. It's been what we've now become accustomed to seeing from Matthews since spring training, which is upper 90s fastball, tons of strikeouts, very few walks, and overall dominance in Major League camp during spring training and now in 2 or 3 starts against AAA hitters. So he's ready to go whenever they need him next. Festa, to me, picked up basically where he left off at the end of last regular season. He had a poor spring training, but it's clear that didn't really matter. Yep. I'm such a, what'd you say, a Festa fanatic?
Festa fanatic.
They called me. I'll take that. It's not that I don't have very high hopes for Matthews, but going back 2 years with Festa, I just think his 3-pitch mix, and now he does have a 4th pitch that he's tinkering with in a sinker in addition to a regular fastball. But I just think his mid-90s fastball paired with swing and miss, very good slider and changeup, one of which he can really use to shut down righties, one of which he can use the changeup to shut down lefties. That is such a straightforward, classic pitch mix for a starter. The high octane stuff is there. The swing and miss is there. What has always been a question with him was walks.
Yeah.
But from what we've seen in the majors, certainly, I'm not going to tell you he's Brad Radke or anything like that from a control standpoint, but walks have very rarely been a big issue for him. And so I'm just a huge believer in Festa. Now, with that said, he might only make 1 more start and get sent back down once Lopez arrives because I think they're going to stick with Chris Paddock still here. We'll see what the next start looks like from Paddock. Yeah. But
how do you like Festan?
I don't know if most people know what a stan is.
I think they do.
Maybe. Festan?
I'm a Festan.
We'll keep working on this. We'll keep workshopping this thing. Somebody said we should, because my headline for the attendance thing was, and I tried 10, to give this to Dan, by the way, Monday. Dan was writing about Monday's game, and I said, put something in like the intro about how it was the land of 10,000 fans,
right.
and he was like, I don't want to, because you know why? He don't want to get a 2-hour phone call. So then I wrote yesterday, and I used it in the headline that their attendance struggles have turned Target Field into the land of 10,000 fans. And somebody was like, that should be your guys' first shirt. land of 10,000 fans. You get like the Land O'Lakes logo looking thing, but let's maybe we'll come up with a more optimistic shirt.
We can get to 10,000 Patreons. That would be a patrons.
Yeah. Well, I tell you this. We get to 10,000 Patreons, I won't answer the phone when it rings from a Twins person anymore, because who cares? One other good note on a returning very soon key pitcher, Brock Stewart, pitched in back-to-back games at AAA. The second one, which was 2 nights ago, struck out all 3 batters he faced. 94, 95 with the fastball, which is good, but it's about 2 miles an hour at his peak before these injuries. It sounds like he, if it's not tonight, probably at some point this weekend in Atlanta will be activated to join the bullpen. So there's another good addition to a bullpen that for the most part has been pretty solid.
Boy, Jax the other day.
Yeah, well, we can talk about him. I mean, we've seen this before with Jax 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Maybe 3 years ago.
Where he has these stints where it seems as if anything that isn't a strikeout is going to be a hit.
Right.
In other words, any contact made against him, he gets what we call BABIP'd, batting average on balls in play, to death.
Although a couple of those balls were stung.
I'm not saying they're squibbers and choppers, but what I mean is he's striking out tons of guys overall.
Yep.
And I think the BABIP, once the ball gets put in play, the batting average is like 400.
Right.
Well, we know just because, I mean, logically, but also there's just decades of data, that means you're unlucky. There's no amount of bad pitching or even meatball throwing that leads to 40-something% of the balls being put in play landing for a hit. And when you go through stretches like this, it's bad luck. It also often means you're missing your spots. You're, putting fat pitches that are going to have a higher BABIP, just not that high, obviously. Right. And I do think there's some of that with him, but we saw it, I feel like it was May, June of like 2 or 3 years ago, where he went through like a 3-week stretch where he gave up like 2/3 of his runs for the whole season and gave up like 1 homer during that. And it's hard in the moment, especially with a reliever where the samples are small, to look at that and convince your brain and say, I'm not taking away from how damaging it's been or that he needs to work on stuff. But all I'm saying is it's not as bad as it looks, but it's hard to care about that in the moment when you're blowing late leads. And, he's one of their best pitchers. And when he's struggling, I think he won pitcher of the year for them last year, right?
I think so.
He definitely got votes for it.
Right,
I remember.
Yes. No, I think you won it.
But the reality is he is giving up a lot of hard hit balls, but he's not giving up home runs. He's not necessarily really walking guys. He's still missing plenty of bats. And the biggest thing maybe is the velocity and the overall stuff are still elite level. And so, they're in trouble if he keeps having stretches like this. But I do think, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. This is the least pessimism causing way to have a stretch this bad. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like, that's on a scale that's not great. But what I'm saying is,
I don't know that
he's not giving up 3-run bombs.
You don't get the sense that he's in trouble. Like, well, he's going to be a long-term problem. But, boy, it's been hard to trust him.
It's a short-term problem, I'll tell you that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm a little worried on that. Obviously, Stewart coming back would maybe ease some of the usage on Louis Varland.
And Varland's usage right now is he's the new third best reliever on this team.
You're saying Jax is no longer.
I'm saying Jackson, Durant are 1 and 2, but Varland is.
Well, they're still using Sands in some pretty big spots.
They're still using Sands. All the Sands. It feels to me like Sands is having trouble throwing strikes, but
Sands gets used much more often to put out someone else's fire,
right?
Like come in and get the last out.
Varland's been using that low way.
True, although I think they prefer a clean inning with Louis, and I think with Louis, for now, while he's still getting comfortable with full-time reliever, I think they still sort of map out his appearances a little bit more,
maybe.
So that it's not bullpen phone rings, you go in. It's more, hey, tonight you're probably going to pitch the 6th or the 7th or something like that.
I bet you that's ending though.
Right. Whereas with Sands,
I bet you by May that's not a thing anymore.
I agree.
Right?
I mean, he's looked very good to me as a reliever. We talked about this, I think, on the Patreon or whatever. There was one other.
Well, I bet you we talked about it Monday because of his outing on Sunday.
Right. Yeah, it's bad. I'm not taking away from how damaging it's been. I have not lost faith in him still being good, in part because of the reasons we just discussed, but in part because we've seen this from him before.
Right, yeah.
And also, it feels to me that people are shortchanging how good he's been over the last 3 years, especially last year. He was amazing last year. I mean, he was a top 5 reliever in baseball in my mind last year. And so it's like, then when he struggles, it's how much kind of goodwill or confidence or faith have you built up through your consistent excellence?
Yeah.
And it just feels like, for whatever reason, maybe it's his background and how he was initially a bad starter and, late career, not late, but, 27-year-old became a reliever. Or maybe it's because he's been somewhat overshadowed in his own bullpen by Duran, just from a stuff standpoint and a dominant standpoint. But it feels to me like he should have built up enough kind of equity,
right,
in terms of confidence people have in him to have a stretch like this. And it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case.
I've also kind of thought, I haven't taken, sort of a pitch by pitch look at that last outing, but I'm getting the sense too that hitters are taking a more desperate approach to him. Like they are playing some guesses on him, and sometimes it's been working. Like, for instance, it looks like they're like, if you get a high fastball, look for a high fastball early in the count and jump on it, because that's as good a pitch as you're going to have to see against them. And if they hit it, well, occasionally, sometimes it's a home run, like it was versus Houston, right? I don't know, and that to me, reeks a little bit of desperation. Like, we know how good this guy is. We need to be up there guessing.
But it's also requires an adjustment from Jax at some point.
That's right.
That's how they're going to try to attack you, basically. Right. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of swing and miss anyway. You might as well be guessing up there. And so, yeah.
The last thing on the pitching front, because of all these injuries and additions and all that, they're going to have to clear a 40-man spot. My guess is, and again, this is something that people will probably see the official move by the time some people listen to this, but so were they wrong or we're right. My guess is it's going to be Cantorino. What's interesting about Cantorino, who's out for the season after another arm surgery,
right.
It would be his 3rd straight missed season, all spent on the 40-man roster,
right.
Which means if he were to stay on the 40-man roster, next year he's out of options anyway, which means he would have to make the Major League team despite having not seen regular season action since June of 2022. I think.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy.
Right.
We've talked in the past about him being on the 40-man roster while out for the season with injuries, arm, shoulder, elbow surgeries, all that. And how they've resisted the temptation to just transfer him to the 60-day IL, which clears him from the 40-man roster. And we've gotten a lot of questions over the years of, like, they act as if a 40-man roster spot is such a precious commodity, and it is to some extent. You lose players all the time that you would like to hang on to because you need to make room on 40-man rosters for Keaschall, let's say, or whatever.
Right.
And over the years, we've said, well, if Cantorino's out for the year and he's on the 40-man roster, why don't you just put him on the 60-day IL, open up that 40-man roster spot, and you basically get a free spot to play with. We've speculated in the past that the reason they didn't do that, and they could have done it each of the last 3 years, by the way,
right,
was that
they didn't want to give him Major League service.
They didn't want to give him both Major League service time, because you have to be
and a minimum salary,
and a $780,000 salary versus $70,000 at AAA or whatever it is. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be the case, and it's why I think you might see him just DFA'd instead of just transferred to the 60-day IL.
Yeah.
Because let's be clear, the 60-day IL is the Major League IL injured list. He's on the AAA injured list. So to put him on the 60-day injured list, you have to recall him to the majors and then transfer him to the 60-day IL. Well, that clears him from the 40-man roster spot, and then you could use that spot on Keaschall or whoever you're calling up, but then he's a major leaguer. He's an injured major leaguer instead of an injured minor leaguer at that point. But the reality is, if you still thought that he was going to be part of your plans and you wanted to clear the roster spot, you could at any point, including today, transfer him to the 60-day IL, clear the roster spot, and yes, you're then paying him the minimum salary, which is 10 times, roughly, the AAA salary.
Right.
And he's accruing Major League service time. Except, why do we care about his Major League service time? He's like 30 years old and he's never pitched in the majors. Exactly. What do you think? He's going to get to free agency? That would be an amazing outcome for the Twins. They'd be thrilled if that happens. So it really just boils down to the $700,000. And to me, the way they treat the 40-man roster, you would think a 40-man roster spot is worth $700,000 to a team. For all the jokes we make about payroll, that spends over $100 million on payroll. What is $700,000?
Right.
I don't think that's how they view it, though, and I think you may see him DFA'd rather than just transferred to the 60-day out. Now, odds are he'll pass through waivers unclaimed,
right?
Because he hasn't pitched in 3 years.
Right.
However, if you were a bad team,
I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why a team wouldn't.
Why not just claim him, put him on the 60-day IL,
right,
and evaluate him next spring when he's healthy? Like, what's the okay? You cost yourself $700,000. The stuff they spend $700,000 on is
that's not a bad for a prospect.
So,
that's not a bad price.
We'll see how it actually plays out with Cantorino. The last couple of things before we ended. Well, I feel like we should talk about Harrison Bader at the very end here.
Okay.
He didn't really fit into our injury discussion. He didn't really fit into our infield discussion. He didn't obviously fit into the pitching discussion. But, his power has gone away after those initial 3 home runs. And he went through a stretch where he was striking out a lot, and the offensive numbers, collapsed to the point that he was barely hitting above 200. And he had an on base of like 260. And it was kind of like, okay, we saw the initial burst of unexpected production, which was great. It helped them quite a bit. Had some 2 and 3 run homers. But then, he kind of turned back into a pumpkin at midnight. And especially if you're going to continue to play him regularly against both righties and lefties, you're going to kind of overexpose a guy who's probably best suited to be a part-timer offensively. And then over the last week or so, he's hitting singles.
Just in time because he's going to be an everyday player pretty soon.
He's hitting singles all over the place. The batting average is back up above 250. The on-base percentage is now like 300 instead of 250. The slugging is almost 500. Now, there hasn't been a lot of power lately, but he's gotten some big hits.
Yes. He's played some great defense.
Well, and this is the thing that I was going to point to, which is I know...
And he's a threat on the base paths. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, although he got thrown out last time. He actually stole the base and overran the base.
Yeah.
And he's been picked off once this year, too. So technically he's 0 for 2 on the bases. But I agree with you. We spent a lot of time early in the season and actually at the end of spring training because you came away from spring training with the correct impression, it turned out, that he was going to play a lot more... He was going to be a lot closer to a regular in left field than a platoon versus lefty in left field.
That's right.
And we talked through kind of what his career numbers were against righties and how that seemed a little iffy and all that. And so that's been part of the offensive up and down narrative.
Sure.
But he's certainly been a good offensive player through 20 games.
Yeah.
The thing we never had in doubt, and the reason we both, I think, like the signing just overall, despite some skepticism about his bat if he used regularly, he's an incredible defensive player. Right. I mean, he's a Gold Glove winning center fielder whose numbers back that up. It's not just, he looks smooth out there. He's very fast, not as fast as he once was. Great arm, a very kind of linebacker-esque approach to chasing down balls into the gap where it's just, he just flies to, it's more of a Torrey Hunter approach than like a Michael A. Taylor approach, I guess.
Having him in left field and Buxton in center field, we saw it versus the Mets. And we saw it with Festa on the mound. Yeah. How many balls were chased down into the gap up against the wall by one of those guys?
The fun part is they both get to
there.
It.
Yeah.
And then they just look at each other.
That's right.
One of them catches it. Like if Buxton catches it, he gets a slap on the butt by Bader. Right. If Bader catches it, Buxton does a little
And that is something that Rocco talked about in spring training is like, they're each other's biggest fans. Yes. They're each other's biggest supporters. They're not like, I should get out of my way. It's my ball. So like that. They're so active. They get so excited when either one of them makes a great catch.
It is funny. They're like the Superman meme or the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It is funny the quotes Buxton gives. He gets so excited. Buxton's a little bit like Anthony Edwards for the Wolves. One of the fun parts of Anthony Edwards, in addition to him just being a great player, he gets so excited for the guys on the back of the bench to get an opportunity and have good moments. He's always becomes the number one cheerleader on the bench. And Buxton, for the most part, is like that as well with rookies and stuff like that. And Bader's not a rookie, but what I mean is some of the quotes about Bader's catches from Buxton are so hilarious to me because they almost give the impression that Buxton also can't do that. Because he makes some catches out there where I'm like, how do you do that? And I want to be like, well, you do that all the time. What do you mean? How do you do that? How do you do that? Like literally, you do that. But it is fun to watch them. And when they've sparingly, but they've played those two in left and center, and then Kersey in right.
Yeah.
We've talked about.
Yeah, that was Wednesday's lineup. That was fun.
You just you can't get a better defensive outfield. You have two Gold Glove center fielders and another legit center fielder.
Right, yeah.
And that has, I mean, you can point, like you said, during the Festa start, there's been a couple other ones, specific moments where Bader not only made a good catch, but made a good catch in a real big spot.
Right, yep.
Where if you miss that ball, 2 runs are scoring. In the
Sunday afternoon's game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to shout him out.
Moment.
I'm still somewhat skeptical if he's a 500 at-bat guy versus a 300 at-bat guy, and we'll see how that plays out. But it's been better than I expected so far, certainly. It's been up and down, but overall better. The defense has been every bit as excellent as we thought. And the funny thing is, he's barely played center field, which was the whole reason they signed. I mean, part of the reason they signed him is they expect Buxton to miss time, and I'm sure that will still happen. But Buxton has played, except for the 2 games he sat out because of personal reasons,
he's
going
played
home
every game
with his family in Georgia. He's played every game, and that has, like we've talked about, caused Bader to be an everyday left fielder, which is an odd role for him. But I mean, that is
left field's big.
True.
Target field.
But yeah, he's very aggressive. We saw him make a great throw to nail a guy at the plate.
Yeah, that was great.
Fantastic throw. He can go into the gap in left center, which is what we're talking about when him and Buxton sort of converge on a ball. But then some of his best plays have been these short liners that are like in front of him where he like goes to on his knees almost and catches it. Right. And those are like, can be the most difficult plays that you hear outfielders talk about because you lose it in the lights, you lose it in the crowd, the reaction time just isn't there. And you know, if I miss this ball may never stop rolling.
Right, that's right.
So I just wanted to give him some props for what has been better than expected to me, at least, or let's put it this way, better than career numbers offensively thus far. Had power early. It's more been singles driven of late, but some big singles too. And then just consistently fantastic, Gold Glove caliber defense. And I looked up some of the numbers because I basically wanted to say, am I like just
overrating this
confirmation bias?
Yeah.
Like,
am I just too used to watching Larnach out there?
Well, okay.
Which is, I'm not saying Larnach's a bad outfielder, but he ain't Bader.
Most left fielders are not Gold Glove winning center fielders.
True,
no, his defensive numbers are phenomenal.
Okay, good.
They're either, depending on which metric you prefer, they're either very good or like incredible. I saw one, he's plus 6 runs already, which even that seems a little far-fetched. But most of them are plus 2 or 3 runs. And just so people are clear, like plus 5 to 10 runs for a left fielder means you're like a Gold Glove for a season. Right. Means you're like a Gold Glove left fielder. So he has been out of this world defensively.
What do you think we see tonight? Do you think he'll be a right fielder or a left fielder?
I don't want to predict today's lineup. Tonight's lineup could just be. It's going to be a very strange lineup.
With Wallner out for 9 more or 7 more days, something like that. I'll be interested to see whether or not they want to keep Bader in left field or they want to keep Larnach in left field. My guess is they put Bader in right and they keep Larnach in left, which I think is probably a mistake defensively, but I can see why you want to do it.
It depends. I mean, I still think we're going to see some Larnach at DH because I do think we're going to see some Keaschall at second. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be some very odd lineups. That we're going to see in general because not only do you have guys banged up, but you have a lot of lefty and not much righty, which is part of the reason they called up Keaschall. But you also have some guys that, like Kersey, I'm not trying to, denigrate him, but they don't really want to play Kersey as a regular. They want to have him as like kind of wheels off the bench, basically, and a glove off the bench. And so, yeah, you're going to see some platoon opportunities maybe passed up in the name of just getting the more reliable overall player, like someone like Bader in there. Yeah, this stretch, because I think Wallner is going to miss more than the minimum, certainly. I think Castro's probably going to miss some time. I think even if Correa doesn't technically go on the IL, that's going to be something to monitor with him. I mean, what is his availability? Is he going to need DH time? Is he going to be pulled from games? What is he swinging like? All that. I actually think Correa's looked good defensively this year.
I think so too.
He's, try to separate that from the offense and say that he's looked
right. That's yet one more factor in sort of I think this wrist thing has been bothering him. I said, that's the sort of thing that bothers you at bat, but not necessarily in the field. He's otherwise perfectly. We were worried about the feet. Yeah. And we're like, but the weird thing about the feet is he still looks so good in the field. Yeah. Well, I agree. And the numbers back that up too. His numbers defensively are very good. So, okay, we will be back Monday. Yeah, we'd love to have you join us over there.
Yeah, it's on Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. You can get the whole archive. You can go listen to that Matthew Leach episode.
Yep.
Also, but we'll be back Monday to do a few things. One, we'll recap this whole Brave series, good or bad, everything that happened. Two, we're going to get caught up on all these incoming injury updates and roster moves.
And lineup changes. And
Keaschall's debut and all this stuff. We also should, at that point, have a much better sense of what Pablo Lopez's situation is heading into the homestand.
And then the following Wednesday,
Brock Stewart's situation.
We'll probably be back with either a mailbag, maybe another special guest. We never know. We've got a couple different special guests.
Yeah, I'm going to just start recording my phone calls with Twins officials, and that's going to be the new page. We could charge triple. We could charge so much. Maybe I'll cut them in.
New subscribers.
Maybe I'll offer to cut them in on some of the profits.
That's a good idea.
They have $400 million in debt, supposedly. So,
we want to thank our sponsors who kept this episode free. That's Game Time, also Hims Hair, and then finally, of course, Black Stack Brewing, our presenting sponsor. Special thank you to them. They're now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota, so stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. We will be back Monday with a wrap-up of the Braves, Keaschall stuff, lineup changes, etc. We hope to see you then.
Gleeman